Hours before the NBA trade deadline, we break down the latest leading up to the big event. Everyone is out on Giannis Antetokounmpo, but Miami, can they finally get something done?
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making us your first listen every day. Join the Cookie Gang, become an everydayer. That means subscribing, tuning in every day, Monday through Friday, and signing up for the Everydayer Club with the link in the show notes. If you use the code DEADLINE right now, do it right now while you're watching us live here on YouTube. You get your first month for free. Even when we sign off of our live stream here, we'll continue to send whatever intel we get to the Everydayer Club there with the link in the show notes between now and the 3 p.m. trade deadline. I'm Wes Goldberg, host of Locked On NBA Daily and Real GM Radio. I'm here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. David, just a few hours to go until the 3 p.m. NBA trade deadline. We have a ton to get to here. I want to talk about Ja Morant and whether or not the Heat should pivot to him here in a second, but let's start with Giannis. Two teams mentioned as leading suitors for Giannis made moves in the last few hours that dramatically impact their pursuits in Giannis and Miami's pursuit potentially here of Giannis before the deadline ends here. Late last night, the Warriors traded Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield to the Hawks for Kristaps Porzingis, essentially ending their Giannis chase. And then we had another trade happen just a few minutes ago where the Wolves traded for Ayo Dosunmu. They moved Rob Dillingham and 4 second-round picks in that move, seemingly ending their chase of Giannis. Now, could the Timberwolves still get in on this? Potentially, although Dillingham was considered a piece that could go back to Milwaukee. We'll see. But it does sound like, based on the reporting, the Warriors certainly are out of it. And the reporting around Minnesota is that maybe they feel like they're out of it, although I won't rule anything out at this juncture. But meanwhile, David, the Heat have not done anything. It was silence when we last spoke. It is still silence now, and it is starting to become deafening. But yes, if you're looking for good news, two of the other main suitors seemingly may be out of it for now.
Yeah, I know. It basically comes down to Miami still being involved and maybe finding a way to get something done, or Milwaukee ultimately saying, you know what, we're not ready to trade Giannis away. And I don't know that there's a sense either way. I know a lot of people are reporting that teams around the league are kind of acting under the impression that Giannis isn't going anywhere, but you still have other reporters, plugged-in reporters, including Brian Windhorst of ESPN, saying Miami is still actively involved and trying to increase or improve their offer to a degree where they can still pry Giannis out of Milwaukee because they'd rather get something done sooner rather than later. So there's a lot going on. I'm hoping this is the podcast jinx here, where we're going online and as we're saying, nothing's going to happen. The news will break even as we're recording, and all of you who are tuning in now get to see it live. That would be awesome if we can pull off the live reaction.
We do have breaking news. The Lakers.
West Angeles Lakers. Yeah, trading Gabe Vincent to the Hawks.
Trading Gabe Vincent and a second round pick to the Hawks for Luke Kennard.
Yeah.
Does this mean that Dalton Connect is on the move? And if so, where? Yeah, I mean, it's... So Jake Fisher, who is very plugged in of the Stein line, reported that the Wolves and Heat, even after the Dosunmu trade, the Wolves and the Heat, sources say, still believe that they're in play for landing Giannis Antetokounmpo today, although, like the Warriors, few believe Milwaukee is actually serious about parting ways with their franchise face. I'm still being told that the Bucks are engaged with the Grizzlies on Ja Morant as well. So we've heard a little bit now that the Bucks could still be in the market for a desperation move that lands them something that could potentially keep Giannis in Milwaukee. Giannis told local reporters in Milwaukee yesterday that, hey, if the Bucks could just magically have a competing roster, he would love to finish his career in Milwaukee. But obviously, basically insinuating that no, they don't. And I don't know that acquiring Ja Morant, if you're Milwaukee, necessarily gets you there. But there's still a ton to sift through here. In terms of the Windhorst report and whether or not the Heat are still engaged and believe that they have a chance at Giannis, since we last spoke, I think, 5 o'clock yesterday, I spent all night. I had the Nuggets Knicks game on TV, and I gotta tell you, I barely watched it. I was barely paying attention until like the last few overtimes, and like Brunson made some shots because I was on the phone with probably a dozen different people trying to figure out what exactly was going on, trying to dig up as much intel as I can. I don't try to dip into the insider waters very often because to me it's frankly boring and not
Muddled.
worth it,
Yeah.
and annoying and frustrating, and so many other things. But around this time, I like to try to get as much information as possible. And I can definitely tell you that the Heat very much are trying to get a Giannis thing here done before the deadline. That they still believe, I don't know to what percentage, but they still believe that there's a chance. And I don't know if it's a Jim Carrey type of you're telling me we got a chance or if it's a real chance. But they believe that they have a chance. And more importantly, it doesn't sound like they're going to do anything that subverts their chance of landing Giannis before they know for sure that they're either out on Giannis or something otherwise. So I think the Heat are still working, and I still think they're working to improve their offer. The only thing I can't figure out, and I cannot, and I've heard some different teams come up, and maybe they've had conversations with this team and that team about this player and that player, but I can't figure out what exactly it is that they're trying to accomplish, other than just hoping that Giannis puts his thumb on the scale and says, "Send me somewhere that's not Milwaukee."
That's what I'm coming down to as well. I just my feeling is that Giannis's comments were almost too passive. And we don't know if he's talked to, John Horst or anybody in the Bucks front office, but if a deal has to get done, or if a deal is going to get done, I think it requires a little extra pressure from him. And based on what his most recent interview, it doesn't seem like he's all that eager to push for a trade. Like he said, he wants to remain with Milwaukee. He would love to be in Milwaukee for the rest of his career, having built that organization up over the course of his career and wanting to see what direction they can possibly take it to. But he's frustrated with the losing, and it seems like they're going to continue losing for some time now. It's not going to be a matter of them turning anything around over the next season or so. But I also don't think that he's pressuring the front office enough to say, look, I don't think this is going to work out, so I need you to get something done. My feeling is that we're not going to hear about any trade until like right at the deadline, where it's almost like Milwaukee's front office is just kind of staring at each other from across the table and saying, look, we've heard what Miami's got. They're not going to get any better. We don't know if they're going to be able to improve their offer in the offseason. And we either have to pull the trigger now or just ultimately decide not to and just kind of lean into even more glaring mediocrity over the rest of the season. I think Windhorst even went on to say that they might shut Giannis down for the rest of the season and just kind of keep him basically stashed on ice until they decide whether or not they're going to move him in the offseason. And I sincerely hope that they don't do that. Like, I just don't want Miami involved at all. I would love if we got a statement from Pat Riley saying, no, we tried. Screw Minnesota, screw Milwaukee, excuse me. Screw everybody, for dangling us along the way they have. We're not going to even bother entertaining these hopes. So it feels like Miami has tried everything. And I guess to answer your question or what you're wondering, I guess it's whether or not they're trying to trade another player, say an Andrew Wiggins, maybe acquire some kind of a trade asset or something like that, a draft pick of some kind. Maybe if the Lakers might be interested in getting Wiggins and eventually including their first round pick, if that's enough to entice Milwaukee, because otherwise I don't know what it is that they could possibly do to improve an offer. At least what we've heard, the bulk of the offer is going to be a combination of picks and players. So
it's a player heavy package, as we know. We know the names by now that are involved in it. I think there's a couple of key questions. Do the Bucks value Kel'el Ware? What is their scout on Ware? Do they look at Kel'el Ware as a blue chip piece? This has nothing to do with how Eric Spoelstra has used Kel'el Ware or anything. The Bucks are going to have their own opinion on who Kel'el Ware is based on his pre-draft stuff and what they've seen from him so far. So do they think Kel'el Ware is the blue chip young piece coming back that they can hang their hat on and say, hey, for Giannis, we got this, and this, and Kel'el Ware, and we feel like we have our center of the future at the very least here. I think another part of this, too, is that Milwaukee does not have their picks going forward, right? I think that they have a swap that's involved in 2026. It's not their pick necessarily, but Portland controls most of their picks after the Dame trade. Do they actually want to remain competitive? And I actually think that that's why the Heat's player heavy offer is at least something that they're considering right now. It's, hey, if we can get Hero and Kel'el and some of these other pieces, we can kind of remain competitive for a while here and just not be an embarrassment while we try to accumulate other sources of draft picks and things like that can help us rebuild the team. I think the Heat are also maybe under the impression that if they get a pick, because right now they can move the 2 first-round picks, but they're out in 2030, 2032. That's not very interesting to me if I'm Milwaukee. Sure. I would like to have something. I would like to make a draft pick within the next couple of years, preferably this year, 2026. I want to make another pick outside of the pick that I already have. I want to make another pick in 2026. But if it's 2027, maybe I can live with that. But I really do think it's just right now the Heat hoping that Giannis does the thing that he has not done. And if Giannis truly wants to make his way out of Milwaukee right now, before the summer, it feels like he's going to have to say something. That until Giannis goes basically to the Milwaukee Bucks and says, "Get me out of here, I'm done," I don't know that Milwaukee does necessarily have any reason to make that trade, unless, of course, Miami improves their offer to the point of, hey, you know what? This makes sense for us at this point. Barry Jackson reporting what Windhorst just said. I don't know if this is what you said. I'm going to read it for the first time live on air. Don't put anything by Andy and Pat. They will keep trying to appease the Bucks until time runs out. But as we've said today, the only way to improve the Heat's offer this summer with a high-value 2026 pick, and that pick would be more attractive if the Heat misses the playoffs. So that's the other thing too. The Heat will have their own pick in 2026. We'll talk about how they can improve their offer over the summer if this goes beyond the trade deadline here in a second. But David, I guess right now we're still waiting on more stuff on Giannis here. Should the Miami Heat pivot the way that maybe the Warriors and the Timberwolves have already pivoted? We'll talk about that next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And if you want candidates who match what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, maybe even location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't want just somebody who can help. I'd want somebody with real experience who can jump right in. That's what I like about Indeed. You get specific and you target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through all the mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by the candidates who are actually a fit. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 new hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, you can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll be right back.
So we've already seen the Warriors pivot. The Timberwolves, I don't know that they've necessarily pivoted, but they're starting to turn, right? They're starting to turn a little bit away from the Milwaukee Bucks here. We'll see what happens there. Is it time for Miami to pivot? This is a question that you and I get asked all the time. Hey, Giannis isn't going anywhere. Make sure that you get Ja Morant before somebody else does, because that's the name here, right? It's Ja Morant. Look, the Heat are not going to do anything until, as long as they think that they could still get Giannis before 3 p.m. Eastern, they're not going to do anything that jeopardizes that, right? We talked yesterday about, hey, can you get Giannis and Ja Morant? Maybe that's something that the Heat are still exploring. I will tell you, I said this before, it is radio silence right now from the Miami Heat in a way that the Heat are always quiet. They're always pretty tight-lipped. I mean, there is nothing coming out of that building right now. And I've talked to a lot of people who are plugged into the Heat right now, and they're saying the same thing. Nobody can get anything from the Heat right now. Now, we'll see what that means. Is it the silence before the storm? Is it the quiet before the storm? Or ultimately, does it result in a dud? But either way, I do think it's fair for people to wonder, should you just pivot to Ja Morant? It does sound like Miami's potential offer for Morant includes basically expiring contracts and not much else. And that Memphis, whether it's from the Heat or another team, they're willing to trade Ja Morant. I would say they're even probably motivated to trade Ja Morant. What they don't want to do is get the Trae Young package back. They want something to show for the Ja Morant trade, likely some kind of draft capital.
Right.
I don't know how much draft capital or how good that draft pick needs to be. Can you move like a top 20 protected bad first round pick just for the press release? Maybe. But I've heard that the Memphis Grizzlies really don't want to do it for basically just the expiring contracts. Now, I think the Miami Heat and maybe some other teams around the league are potentially calling Memphis's bluff and saying, if you really want to move on, you've already moved Bane, you've already moved Jackson. If you really want to move on, we think you'll do it for basically nothing and the expiring contracts just to get off the Morant money, which, by the way, has a lot of value to Memphis if they want to now use their cap space over the summer that they're going to have, especially if they move Durant, to acquire unwanted salaries and more picks, right? So there is value in Memphis just taking the expirings to get off the next 2 years of Morant's contract. A lot of value in it, I would argue. And that's probably what the Heat are saying too is, hey, we know what the value is here. Expiring contracts have a lot more value to you than maybe any other team in the league right now. This is of value. We're doing you a favor. I even heard that maybe the Heat would ask the Grizzlies to throw in a draft pick to take Morant off their hands. So I do think in terms of the Ja Morant stuff, David, that's where I think things are.
Yeah, I wonder if Morant has enough pull with the front office to put the pressure that we're expecting Giannis to do. Like, can he force the issue a little bit? Because, I mean, it's not like he has – I know he's burnt – maybe not necessarily burnt bridges there, but he's caused some trouble there. He hasn't always been an easy player to deal with. And that being the case, I wonder if he feels comfortable saying, no, please get this done. I don't think that matters. I think from all the reporting, Memphis seems like they're interested in, again, not working with him and getting the right deal done. But he doesn't want to be there anymore. Like, as you said, they traded away half the roster. They traded away the veteran players. They're leaning into this rebuilding mode. Why would they even want him on the roster? So I think it's fair for Miami to say, no, we're not going to overpay for Morant. That is our pivot. And we're going to give up what we've offered, and that's about it. So I wouldn't want Miami to give any more or to have to trade away an additional player to get a draft pick just to include that in a deal for Morant, because I am concerned, and I don't know if you've clearly stated it. How do you feel about the Morant addition? Because I think that the fit is still a concern. I don't know how he's going to play here, and I'm worried about the lack of three-point shooting on a team that kind of needs it now. Does he apply the rim pressure that Miami desperately needs? Is he going to be able to take on the scoring load? Is he going to be able to be the kind of ball distributor, the guy who can initiate actions and be the engine on a team that desperately needs one? Because I think those are all legitimate questions, and I think that's why you don't overpay for Morant. If you're going to pivot and you're not going to be able to land Giannis, I think I don't know that you should lean in completely into the addition of Morant. I don't know that you should overpay for him at this point. I think.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it costs you what could help you get Giannis in the summer, and that's the other thing about the Morant trade. Even if you're not getting Giannis now, if there's still the possibility of getting Giannis over the summer, I don't know that in acquiring John, and this is why I think the Heat are so reluctant to include any sort of draft compensation, even like a distant 2032 pick. Is like, hey, we need that for Giannis this offseason. And so, yeah, I'm with you. Look. Is Ja Morant a great fit? Are there a ton of questions about him? I just asked two different questions. No and yes, respectively. If the cost is so low, I'm almost at the point of, I understand the fit concerns. I understand that he sucks up a lot of oxygen in the room. I understand that he might not be that star player that you want. Maybe he is, right? Like, who knows how he could develop in Miami. But if the cost is so low, and then the contract is an issue, right? It goes past 2027, which is that offseason that the Heat have earmarked as an offseason where they want to have the cap space. I'm at the point now, if it's basically the expiring contracts, just do it. Just get it done, right? And maybe that's just me selfishly being like, just shake this thing up. Do something, right? If it's not going to be Giannis, do something. I think there is, by the way, more than emotional value in shaking things up. I think this Heat team needs a shakeup. I think that's very clear based on this season so far, that they need to add some sort of energy. Now, I don't know that necessarily...
Is that Morant?
I don't know that it's Ja Morant, right, to your point. But do something, right?
I don't know. I don't know.
The front office's job is to not be emotional. The front office's job is to stay. That's why they get paid to make these decisions. Is the hard part about this is removing emotions and saying no matter what, we still think we might have a chance, maybe even be in the driver's seat for Giannis this summer. We're not going to do anything to jeopardize that.
Yeah, I don't think they want to make their team worse. Like, I know a lot of people are claiming, Miami has stood pat. And I feel that frustration. Like, I don't want to see another Sharania tweet about Atlanta or Charlotte or Chicago or any of these teams making another deal in the East. And then to watch Miami passively watch this. But
I'm sorry to break it to you. Chicago just made another move. They just signed Mac McClung to a 2-way contract.
Well, that's it. It's over. Put a pin in the trade deadline.
Three-time dunk contest champion. That would have been some energy.
No, it wouldn't have. I hope you like Sioux Falls, buddy. In any case, listen. I don't think the players on the roster are the problem. Like these moves that we're talking about, they're trading lesser players to get another middle player, like a middling player. Like Dosunmu is a fine player. Like I know Heat fans are kind of like thinking back to last week when he torched Miami in the fourth quarter. That's all fine. Like Chicago wasn't
Minnesota's in a position to make Dosunmu matters for Minnesota.
Exactly.
Minnesota could argue they're a Dosunmu away from winning a playoff series. The Heat are not a Dosunmu away from diddly squat. The Heat are a Dosunmu away from being back in the play-in tournament, right? I like Dosunmu a lot. He's one of my guys, But
you've got enough role players in Miami already. Right. You don't need to make another trade for another role player.
Correct. The Heat, and this is why I think you see a team like the Warriors say, we're going to punt on Giannis for now, because even with everything that it would cost us to get Giannis, we're probably still not a contender in the West. If it's just Giannis, Steph, and Quentin Post, that's not good enough. And I think Minnesota pivots because they say, look, we were in the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row. We don't have to do this. And we're not going to gut our entire roster that was in the conference finals for 2 straight seasons in the West. We're not going to gut everything to go get Giannis because we have our star player. We have the guy with a capital G in Anthony Edwards. The Heat are still in this because they are so far away. The Heat are in this because they could presumably trade for Giannis, still have Bam, and then go about building over the next few months from there. A few more stuff to get to, including I'm not off the Ja Morant thing. I think that there are 3 main questions that the Heat have to be asking themselves ahead of the trade deadline in terms of whether or not it's worth pivoting to Ja Morant. We'll talk about that next. Is it worth pivoting to Ja Morant? So, first and foremost, you have to even explore this. I think if it's to pivot to Ja Morant and only Ja Morant, you have to be operating under the assumption that Giannis is not going to get moved. So that's just put that over there. And I think if the Heat come to the conclusion that Giannis is not getting traded, I do believe that the Heat will pivot to Ja Morant discussions based on my conversations over the last 24 hours. That's what I think will happen at this point. Now, I think there are 3 questions then that come into play. Morant clearly is not Giannis. But do the Heat believe that he can reach similar heights as to what Jimmy Butler was able to reach in a playoff setting in order to carry them in a postseason? That to me is a huge question in this. If you can go get Giannis, you know what Giannis is going to do. Okay, you do that. That's why Giannis is number 1. That's why he's the priority. But if you're going to miss out on Giannis, you ask me what I think about Ja Morant. I think everything right now is risk-reward with him. I think he's a tremendously talented player. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the league when he's right. What he was able to do to the Warriors, what was that, 3 playoffs ago? Yeah. Like, what did he break, a finger or something in that series? Like, I think the Grizzlies could have won that series. He was tremendous. But he has not reached those heights since then. Now, a lot of stuff has happened in Memphis. I said on yesterday's show, I think most people would assume that Morant would be at the very least marginally better in Miami than he's been in Memphis the last couple of years, just because of the change of scenery, if nothing else. But do you have a realistic expectation that Morant can reach heights that could help carry you and win you a playoff series? If you think that the answer to that question is yes, I think you move forward with the next two questions. Question number 2, are you willing to give up a draft asset that could otherwise be used for Giannis over the summer? That's the other question. I think if you could get Memphis a draft asset, I think they probably make the trade at this point. Expiring contracts, no. Expiring contracts plus draft asset, yes. Maybe they do it just for the expirings, and maybe Miami calls their bluff and they get it anyway. But that's the other thing. And number 3, and I do think this is an important thing here when we've not talked about this on the show, David. Do the Heat think that getting Morant now actually can help them get Giannis in the summer? In other words, does Giannis look at this roster with Bam and say, it's going to cost the young players and the picks, and I'm going to go to Miami to play with Bam and maybe Norm Powell or whatever else is left? Do I look at that team and clearly Giannis is looking at that situation potentially and saying, that's not compelling enough for me to demand the trade? But I wonder if the Heat trade for Ja Morant now, and now Giannis is looking at a roster with Bam and Morant on it, and then over the summer, and does he say, now that's a little bit more compelling? I don't know. I don't know what Giannis thinks about Ja Morant. I know that Giannis picked Ja Morant on his All-Star team a few years ago when he was the captain. So I guess he likes him. Now that was a lot of stuff has happened in Ja Morant's life since then. So I don't know where Giannis falls on Ja Morant, especially when Giannis is out here talking about maturity and all these things that his current roster is lacking. So I think that's still an open question. But I do think if you're the Heat, you have to at least ask it like, hey, acquiring Ja Morant now, does that actually help our chances of getting Giannis in the summer?
I don't think it does. I think it hinders it, to be honest with you. I think the move is for Miami to get both or neither. And in my opinion, like at least before this trade deadline, I from Giannis's perspective, I don't know that adding Ja is going to make any difference. And I think it's going to boil down to the same thing, like Giannis's unwillingness to force a trade. He has that power. We know he does. And I think he's concerned about his legacy in Milwaukee. I think he's concerned about appearing to be the bad guy. And I've said it before, like there's something about Giannis that has always been difficult for me to stomach, or to, at least in my limited perspective of it, is that, you know, he's got this image of him being the nice guy to being a guy who's, you know, built up something from the ground up and wants to stay with Milwaukee and everything else like that. And in a way, he's kind of torn the same way LeBron was in 2010. The difference, well, he's already won a championship. So I don't think there is. I know that he wants to continue to add to his legacy, but if he retires today, is he not still a Hall of Fame player?
Yeah.
He's already a top 75 player.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
He's a Hall of Famer. He's done everything. His legacy is insured. So I think he doesn't want to do anything to jeopardize that by being the guy like Kevin Durant, who is basically without a home, a nomadic Hall of Famer, one of the best players of all time, who isn't even viewed that way within context of the league right now, because he's played for so many different teams and he's never quite been satisfied. And he's won 2 championships. And again, he's accomplished everything too. But with Giannis, I don't think he wants to be seen that same way. And so I don't think he's ever going to force the trade. And so I don't think that the addition of Morant is going to make any difference in that.
I'm going to push back on that, because I think he's not forcing the trade yet, because I don't think he sees another situation out there that is clearly the situation that could be his next forever team. But if there were a team that could position themselves as, hey, we are the forever team, then maybe Giannis does apply a little bit more pressure to that front office. And you are 100% right. I think Giannis very much cares about his perception in Milwaukee, right? And he doesn't want to be... And right now, he could still walk away. He could get traded this instant and say, I never demanded a trade. And for some reason, that matters to him. As if all Bucks fans are in love with Giannis and equally as just stupid. Like, if anybody, like, I don't. This is the part I don't understand. If Giannis really wants to get his way out of Milwaukee, just ask for the trade, man. Like, just do it. At this point, who are you kidding? Ask for the trade. And if you think that Miami can be your forever team, ask for the trade and ask for it now. Because the Heat have a much easier path to getting you in Miami without giving up a bunch of stuff that could potentially cost you a chance to compete right now as opposed to this summer, right? Because they have the Rozier expiring, because they have these stackable salaries that they're not going to have over the offseason. So
the Rozier deal, that's an interesting one here, because I think that's a point of contention for fans. It's like, what are you going to do if you don't use that contract? Like, what is the team even doing at this point? Because they've got to be able to move him, because his contract's expiring. So right now you've got this $26 million that you have an ability to use, and no team seems to be that interested in acquiring Rozier and getting the cap flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I think if you don't get Giannis, you make a 11th hour phone call to Memphis about Ja Morant, and that's where you use the Rozier contract. Now, you know, the Heat have done this before, right? They adjusted protections on a pick. I can't remember when or exactly what the details were of it a couple years ago, with the idea of using that new flexibility in order to make some sort of deadline acquisition, and then they didn't, right? So sometimes you do stuff in preparation of other things, but it doesn't always work out, right? But I think in the case of the Terry Rozier contract, this is exactly why I say if it's clear that you're not getting Giannis, it's why I think you pivot in the last minute to Ja Morant. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're definitely getting a Morant deal done, but I think those are the conversations that happen after that. You're muted. David, you're muted.
This is a comment I wanted to highlight here, because I think it's a concern here. It's not that Morant isn't better than everybody on our bench. We know that. Who cares? That's not the point. You need a superstar. Your bench is fine. You've got enough threes and twos on this roster on a scale of 1 to 5. You're looking for somebody who's going to be a 5. You're going to look for somebody who's going to be that superstar. And I don't know that Morant is that player anymore. I don't know if he's going to be that player in Miami. And you don't want to pay him as much money as his contract is owed in order to just take a risk. So it's a huge gamble for Miami. If you're going to add Morant, it's only because you've already got Giannis that you're going to be able to swing a trade for. Because then Morant, again, is unlocked to another degree. He doesn't have to carry the team. I don't know that Morant can carry this team just by being on this roster. Like, he needs another star player to kind of draw that attention. At least this version of Morant. 3 years ago, I don't think that's even a question. Now, I'm not so sure. And I don't think the Heat know. And if his value was as high as everybody seems to think it is, then why wouldn't there be more teams interested in acquiring Ja Morant?
Yes, correct. Yeah, I was asked, would you just swap Hero for Morant at this point? I'm like, that's too much to give up at this point. And I don't even want to have the debate about who's better, Hero or Morant. That's not important. What's important is the market, and the market has spoken. There is none for Ja Morant at this point. Why would you give up a valuable player who was an All-Star last year if you can get Morant for something a lot cheaper? It's why I asked the question. No, Ja Morant is not that superstar player right now, and he hasn't been that player for a couple of years now. But if you realistically, if you're the Miami Heat, you think that there is a chance that he can blossom into that. If he's never going to be Giannis, he'll never win it. Ja Morant's not going to win an MVP, right? But if you can get him at next to nothing, and you think that he could carry you to a playoff series win, right? Jimmy Butler was Tobias Harris during the regular season and then turned into Michael Jordan in the playoffs. If you think that Ja Morant can do something similar, where if you acquire him, he's the kind of player that this roster does not have, an aggressive number one option on offense. They don't have that kind of player. When Ja Morant is right, we have seen it in a playoff series. He can be that kind of guy. If you think, as the Miami Heat, that he can still reach those heights and can carry you into a playoff series win, then I think you have to have a serious conversation about acquiring Ja Morant. Understanding, yeah, obviously we'd prefer to have Giannis or one of the best 10 players in the league, but we can't. But we can get Ja right now. And I do think that's worth the conversation.
It's a tough decision for Miami, and I don't envy them. I don't know.
And you don't do it if it costs you Giannis. And you don't do it if it costs you even a chance at Giannis in the summer. I want to be very, very clear about that.
My feeling is that I don't know. I honestly, my gut tells me that Miami will make the trade for Morant if they can't land Giannis, and I don't think they should. But that's a whole other story. Who knows? It might work out. And if it does, you know what? Maybe you just get your hero, you get your superstar at a good value, and you're able to resuscitate his career. Maybe he turns things around, and maybe he turns into the player that a lot of people expected him to be. Maybe he gets back to the trajectory that he was just a few years ago.
So as of 10:30 a.m., this is on ESPN from Jamal Collier. All eyes around the NBA will be focused on Milwaukee ahead of the deadline, blah, blah, blah. The Bucks don't feel the pressure to move Giannis on Thursday, team sources told ESPN hours ahead of the deadline. Rival executives have grown dubious in the past 24 hours about whether the Bucks would actually move their franchise star after more than 12 seasons together. Late Wednesday night, one potential suitor, blah, 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 blah. That's not necessarily the report that the Bucks are definitely not trading Giannis before the deadline. But like I said, there's a lot of teams. I'll say this. Would the Heat... Oh, I'll ask you this question, David. Would the Heat just pivot right now if they, like Golden State and Minnesota, maybe felt like we're not getting Giannis? If they, like so much of the rest of the league, felt like the Bucks weren't going to move Giannis before the deadline, wouldn't the Heat just pivot? Like, that's what makes sense. Clearly, the Heat still think that they have some kind of chance here. And I just wonder, are they waiting for Giannis behind the scenes to just tell them it's not happening before the deadline?
It's possible. I mean, again, it's a relationship with Giannis's agent. I think that matters. Like,
It does.
the fact that they've made Bam the centerpiece of this, the building block of this franchise. I mean, there's goodwill there. So I think that's why I still have hope that the Giannis thing gets done, because the agent would be the one to know what Milwaukee's intentions are. Maybe they've frozen him out, right?
Well, maybe no. Maybe I think maybe that's the better way to frame it, David. Right? Maybe it's not, hey, we're still waiting on Giannis to tell us something. It's the fact that Giannis hasn't told us we're not in it. Right? Like, we have as much of a connection to Giannis's agent as anybody else in the league. Alex Saratzis, who is Giannis's agent, has two big clients. Giannis is his biggest client. Bam is his second biggest client. Maybe the Heat aren't being told, hey, this isn't done.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning as well, is that he would be the one to tell him Milwaukee's still mulling it over. There's no reason for you to panic at the 11th hour. Hold tight. This is going to get done. It might be overly optimistic, but I think it's a realistic possibility also, is that he's there listening to both sides of things. He's working with Miami as the next preferred destination for Giannis, and at the same time, he's also hearing things from Milwaukee's front office regarding whether or not they're entertaining the offer any further. So, but there's also the question about what is the pivot for Miami, and I don't know. Again, is it Ja? Is it just nothing? Is it Giannis or standing pat? I think that's what a lot of people perceive it as too, and maybe that's a question we could address too. Like, should Miami like sell at this point? Should they just blow it up? And I know a lot of fans might think yes, but I don't see the Heat operating that way, for better or for worse.
The problem is the timing of it, right? Like, if you're really going to take this down to the wire, unless you have these trades lined up with other teams that might not be making moves outside of this, like, it's really hard to do that, right? It's really hard to be like, by 2:50, we know that Giannis isn't getting traded. We have 10 minutes to figure out how to sell these spare parts. I don't know. But I would say this, like, there is an argument to be made if you're, and it's why Miami might end up looking silly at the end of all this, is Golden State made a move to presumably improve their team and get Kristaps Porzingis and make the most out of that Jonathan Kuminga asset. Minnesota made a move to improve their team by adding Ayo Dosunmu. If the Heat are just left holding an empty bag at the end of this, it's going to look bad. And you could argue that the Heat aren't the team that need to make a Porzingis move. They're not the team that need to make a Dosunmu move. Like, to your point, right. They need to take a step back. And I would argue maybe the reason they need to take a step back is to improve their chances of getting Giannis this summer, because Wiggins has a player option, Rozier's contract expires, Fontecchio's contract expires. Like, you could make the argument that Miami right now should be looking to figure out how do we turn Terry Rozier and that contract into somebody that we can use, who's under contract for next season, that we can use to stack salary in the summer? You can make the argument that they should be looking at trading Andrew Wiggins for a first-round pick or a bunch of second-round picks or something like that that can help grease the wheels on a trade for the summer for Giannis.
Yeah.
But clearly, the Heat still believe that there's a chance at getting Giannis right now. So we'll see what happens. So to recap, I suppose, Dave, and we'll log off here because we got other things to do here. Giannis, number one priority as of us recording this. It's 11:16 a.m. Eastern time. Giannis, still, the Heat believe, a possibility. Still, obviously, the number one priority. I do think that if they come to the realization or the conclusion, for whatever reason, that they're not going to get Giannis before the deadline, I think that they will pivot to Ja Morant conversations. I have heard from a reliable source that the offer is expiring contracts and that Memphis is holding out for some kind of draft compensation if and when they do decide to trade Ja Morant before the deadline. So that's something to keep tabs on. Obviously, we'll have more. We're going to log off here. Thanks to everybody who tuned in to our live stream here. Hey, listen, if you want updates between now and the next time we do a show, sign up with the Everydayer Club. You could tap the link in the show notes. Use the code DEADLINE. It still works for the next few hours. Use the code DEADLINE. You're going to get your first month for free. It's a no-brainer. Sign up right now. You could tap the link in the show notes and start signing up as soon as we log off here. But thanks to everybody who tuned in live here on YouTube. We'll be back later today with some sort of reaction to whatever it is that happens or doesn't happen, David. So talk to you soon.
All right, man. Take care.